Welcome to the Future of Teamwork podcast, where we explore cutting-edge strategies to keep teams human-centered, drive innovation, and empower you with the tools and insights needed to help your team excel and thrive in today's changing world. Your host is Dane Groeneveld, a seasoned expert with over 20 years of experience enhancing team dynamics and innovation. This week, Dane is joined by Scott Morris. Having navigated the evolving landscape of talent management across 5 industries and 2 continents, Scott led HR strategy for nimble tech startups and orchestrated comprehensive workforce solutions for enterprises with more than 15,000 employees. Now, founder and CEO of PropulsionAI, Scott is building an HR team with just AI, digital teammates that coach managers through talent challenges the way skilled HR leaders would. In this episode, they'll discuss first, why so many hiring processes fail and the human toll of bad fit. Second, how focusing on outcomes instead of tasks changes everything for engagement and performance. And finally, why HR burnout is at an all-time high and how AI can free teams from repetitive work. If you've ever wondered how AI could actually make the world better for both people and organizations, you'll want to hear this conversation. So, teamwork makes the dream work, and we're here to inspire your next collaborative breakthrough. Gather your team or put on your headphones, and let's dive in together.
Welcome to the Future of Teamwork podcast. My name's Dane Groeneveld, CEO of the Huddle 3 Group. And today I'm joined by Scott Morris, the CEO and founder of PropulsionAI. We're going to be talking about Athena. We're going to be talking about the whole concept of AI as a teammate and what Scott's experienced life to date and what's driving this whole exciting future. So welcome to the show, Scott.
I so appreciate you having me on. I've been a big fan and like a secret watcher, and now I get to be on the show, and I'm really excited. So thank you for having me, Dave.
It's already been a buzz pre-show, so it's only going to keep getting better from here.
Oh, wow. Okay. It's because of Athena. It has nothing to do with me because I'm not that interesting, but Athena is extremely interesting, and I'm glad there's some buzz.
That's great. So tell us a little bit more, like how did you come to be at this moment, Scott?
God. All right. So I have like the weirdest career trajectory arc ever. I came out of college and I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I think everybody who struggles in the very beginning, like makes the same choice. And that's a joke because I became a cop for LAPD. Wow. And, I did some time in that job. And I think that there were a couple of things that drew me out. One is I was super idealistic when I went in, and it's a job that clears that up really, really quickly. And the other is I had just entrepreneurial desires that I wanted to go out and kind of chase. And I took a long route to get to being, an entrepreneur. I had a couple of early flirts with it, but became, a head of HR. I've been in the profession of HR for 25 years. About 20 of those in the C-level role, organizations as large as 15,000, and in nimble startups, 250 and a little bit less. And I actually think the 250 end of the spectrum actually served me better because in a company of that size, like nobody cares what your title is. Nobody cares who's on the executive team. You just roll up your sleeves and you dive in and you do the work. But the value of that for me was I've been, a frontline provider of services, a comp and HR business partner and recruiter. And, I gained an understanding not just of what managers struggled with, but what the HR practitioners and the talent team was struggling with as well. And then, the larger end of the spectrum for me, guiding the strategy and trying to weave all of that together, it gave me a different sort of take on the entire thing. So I come to the point where I am building a tech company focused on HR tech, but I come at it as a practitioner. And as a buyer of tech for 20 years, I think my greatest frustration was not that it didn't work, because there's a lot of really good pieces of HR tech out there, but it always felt like it was made by people that were adjacent to the problems. They had done good research and talked to people, but they'd never been dug in. They'd never been a frontline, provider of service. Yeah. They'd never had to solve the problems. And I somehow, I got this crazy idea that I would just be better leading a software company because I understood the problems firsthand because I'd solved them firsthand. Yeah. You take that and then, the reality is, and we know this from a study that was published by Harvard Business Review, 46% of new hires fail in their first 18 months.
Oh, it's a horrible stat.
I became one of those spectacular crash outs
Yeah.
I joined a company. I joined it for all of the wrong reasons. This is after 25 years of avoiding these mistakes and helping other people sidestep the landmines. And I stepped on a huge one. And it, it wasn't that I was a bad practitioner or it was a bad company. It was just such not a fit. And it became obvious like 60 days in that if I said, the sky was blue, everybody else was saying it's just not blue, like it's any other color. And the way I communicated and the places where I was tolerant of kind of like, we're going to be mediocre there. And the places where I was like, we are not being mediocre here. It was just like everything was reversed. And when I crashed out of it, the emotional toll, like SHRM estimates that it's like between 90 and 200% of a person's salary in terms of the cost of having a mishire. I actually think the cost is a lot larger than that. I'll justify that if you want to talk about it. But what doesn't ever get accounted for is the personal toll, the personal stress, the feeling of failure. And that became a really important concept to me. And so I brought all of that together and I said, you know what? I'm going to do something that I hope is meaningful to a lot of companies, but also meaningful to a lot of individuals. And I'm going to fix those problems. And that's kind of what brought us to where we are.
Very cool. I know you and I were talking pre-show about Andre Martin's work on wrong fit, right fit. And he talks about that too, that there is a larger toll of mishiring. It's not just the salary, the productivity, it's the human impact. And I think in one of his interviews, he talked about the person saying they felt like they'd been through 10 rounds of a boxing match. Like it just felt heavy. They felt like they were constantly under fire because they didn't really fit in the way that the business did their work. The how they work just wasn't aligned.
That's right. And I think to clear things up, just make sure it's crystal clear for the audience. Andre's a big fan of mine, and he and I, or I was correct that. Sorry, the other way around. I'm a huge fan of his.
Both.
I know you've had him on the show. I hope he's a fan of mine. I don't know. He's more impressive than I am. But when the last time he and I were talking about it, it's important to differentiate between fit and fit in. And it's not about fitting in, and it shouldn't be about fitting in, and nobody should have to feel like they fit, that they fit in. But there's a real difference when you don't have to pick your words with your boss, and where the tough feedback that you receive from a really good boss doesn't feel punitive. It feels growth oriented, and where the way that you communicate and the way that you think and the leadership style that you are given and the one that you need match up. That's fit. And I think that's a really important concept. And I think and Andre does too, think that there are very specific ways that you can find that fit. And that's one of the things that we're trying to explore deeply right now.
That's super cool. And it is something that to your point, we've always talked about fit in. Let's take them to the bar and have a beer and see if there's someone I'd like to drink with. That's just so dated and it was never right in the first place. But the fit in the how we work, the how we give feedback, how we make decisions, how we run meetings, like that is that's extremely energizing when done right and extremely draining when done wrong.
You think about Dan Pink's work. Drive is a great book, and mastery, autonomy, purpose, those meta concepts, that's what people are looking for. And if you can have that inside of an environment that just sort of feels like it's supporting your journey to those three things, then I think you've really found it.
Very cool. Well, let's dive right in. I could have gone right down the path of the starting out as a cop with LAPD, but we'll save that for another time. I want to get right into Athena and how you're solving for that problem of fit from, sourcing through hiring, onboarding, training, development, you name it. I'd love to see where it fits.
Well, let me try and get a picture for you in your head about what we do as a company, what PropulsionAI does. So if you think back across your career, think about that one manager that you always wanted to work for. Now, I will bet that that person was at the head of a team that a lot of people wanted to work for. And the reason is they were doing things differently on that team. And they did things differently because the manager knew things that other managers sometimes miss. And here's what we think they are. That manager understood undoubtedly how each of the roles on that team fit the broader strategy for the organization. And they could talk about it. They understood the difference between an outcome and a task. And they understood the outcomes that each of those players needed to generate. They understood in specific terms how they were going to measure success for the outcomes that they needed that person to produce, and they were able to speak definitively about them. And they understood the competencies and skills that were necessary to optimize that work. And as a result of that knowledge, they were able to do things differently. They were able to give autonomy, including, by the way, this big debate that we have right now about remote work.
Yeah.
It's even entering into debate because we are so task focused that we've got to see people sitting at their desk with effort metrics rather than being outcomes focused. Because if you're outcomes focused, and I have a way to measure it, who cares where you do the work and who cares when you do the work? But organizations are so stuck and so entrenched by, in tactics that they're missing that. So, that manager produced a different impact. And that's why everybody not only wanted to join it, but they were likely a high performing team that was maximizing the talent of the people. And that goes to purpose, it goes to meaning, it goes to employee satisfaction and engagement. And we know from work that Towers Watson did that fully engaged people tend to produce 16% more than we pay them, and fully disengaged people tend to produce about 60% of their payroll value, 60. So we're losing 0.4 of an FTE for every fully disengaged person. And all people want is to understand, how do I fit in? And specifically, what do you want from me?
Yeah. That's a huge number, 40% loss.
Right. I mean, imagine having 36 or 40 people on your who are producing nothing.
Yeah.
That's massive.
And even if you go right down into the micro for a minute, you said it earlier at the beginning of this conversation that, there's the 90 to 200% of salary you lose on the wrong hire, but what about the emotional toll and the damage on the individual? So if you've got an individual on your team that's sitting there knowing that they're not productive, that their outputs don't really matter to the team, they're really just a passenger, that can't feel good for them.
No, it can't.
It's not where they want to be.
And it goes back to early work, theory X, theory Y, right? And if you're a theory Y person, you're believing that everybody shows up at work basically wanting to achieve, wanting to do the best, wanting to contribute. And then we just get in their way with stuff. And that's why I say these things are really hard to do. Turning around and doing something, it's hard to do. But conceptually, it's not hard.
Yeah. Neat. So you've mapped out this, what I'm hearing, Scott, this framework of like what a good manager and a team looks like. What is that system of work? Whether it's clarity on outcomes, how you measure them, how you're deploying tasks, how you're putting the right skills and capabilities together. That's a lot of problems to solve. How did you start with like one of those?
Well, we started with what we thought was the root cause. And I realized that I started to try and paint the picture of what we do as a company. And I kind of got into one aspect of it.
That's
but
good.
It's, the root cause is, if that manager is not thinking in those terms, there is nothing downstream that's going to be easy. Now, it doesn't immediately mean that they're going to fail, because there are a lot of successful companies and they're doing a lot of really good things, but it means that you're stacking the deck against yourself. And so getting clarity in each manager's mind about the fit of the roles and about the outcomes and about the success measures, that is the root cause of the problem. So we started to look, and our analysis early in the company's development was, why is that not happening? And we went, we sort of traced to a handful of thematic reasons. One is it's hard. It's intellectually challenging, and a lot of managers are not equipped to go on that journey alone. I can tell you, as a practitioner with 25 years of experience, my biggest lament was always that either my personal effort or the effort of my teams, no matter how many we had, and I think at my high watermark, I had 90 people that were reporting through my organization. And none of us felt like we scaled, that we had the bandwidth to do all of the things that the organization wanted us to do. So it's hard work. Managers aren't equipped to do it on their own, and they don't have a really good guide. And then here came artificial intelligence, not in obviously we didn't create the tools in the last, year that we're using today. They've been out there for a long time, but it's started to really become affordable to utilize some of these tools. And so what we did is we built, effectively, we call her a digital teammate or an AI teammate. Her name is Athena, and she is a coach. and she coaches at scale. And what she does is she will interview the manager about the role. She will help provoke that manager's thinking. She will draw out insights that might have been otherwise missed or that are maybe difficult for that manager to articulate. Because there are some managers who they know the stuff, but they have a really hard time getting it out. She coaxes that out of them. She uses frameworks that have been proven successful by top HR and talent leaders. And then inside of those frameworks, we built an artificial intelligence engine. And so she processes in very similar ways to how a human would process. And by that, what I mean is she will ask questions and take answers. She'll put different pieces of information together, reason about them, create content, and then she'll serve that up to that manager. And that manager looks at that content, gives feedback about it, and then she goes through an iteration loop with them. And then the manager says, yeah, I'm good with that. And then she moves on and builds the next piece on the previous. And that's exactly the way that a human practitioner would operate with a manager, where they're guiding them through the process. Now, we think that creates a couple of advantages. One is it absolutely scales. Athena can help 400 managers all at the same time, whereas the HR team has to work sequentially. Athena is processing in parallel. So the cool thing is when she is done with the session, she's created a performance-based job description that has KPIs in it that she has turned into OKRs, target results for the first year. She's got an SEO optimized job posting if you need it for the web. She's got an interviewer guide set up for structured interviews. She's got a recruiter spec so that sourcing and screening can be faster. We estimate right now, based on our customers, about half of the time because it's extremely targeted. She's done compensation analysis on base salary. It's the complete package. So you get all of the benefit of working the way you would work with a human colleague, but it's available when and where they want, and then all of the collateral gets done for you.
That's fantastic. And it's really interesting that you talk about HR not scaling, because HR, I find in the last couple of years post-COVID, is probably at one of its lowest leverage points that I've seen in 20 years. Like going into COVID, HR was really high leverage. A lot of companies were leaning in, and then COVID hits and everyone needed HR. And we spent a huge amount of money on tooling and scaling up teams to really make it all work. And then coming out of COVID, I'm seeing this real, I don't know if it's burnout of the HR practitioners. I don't know if the bottlenecking in organizations from HR not scaling meant that managers just stopped going to HR. But I've seen a lot of bad practices creep in, particularly to larger organizations.
What's your leading hypothesis? I mean, nobody's going to have an answer to that yet, but
if I'm really honest, I think that a lot of managers and a lot of executive leaders just outsourced the social processes of building teams, running teams to HR. And it was never HR's job to run all of that for an organization. Like to your point, managers, if the manager doesn't have the mindset and the framework, everything's going to be hard downstream. That was what you said. And I think if executive leaders, if middle managers are saying, well, that's HR's job, we're outsourcing it, then therein lies the crux of the problem. I think you need to have a much better collaboration. I'm sure you've seen that in your better moments in the 25 years as a HR leader, is when you're working with a team of leaders who are really engaged in not only how you work and how you build frameworks, but how they reinforce that work in their day-to-day, then it works. So I think COVID just, it pushed us together and created some really cool stuff and then tore us apart just as quickly.
I wrote an article that HR Exec Magazine picked up, and the title of the article is AI is going to take your HR job and it's about time. And my point in the article is, I wrote it with a good colleague from England, Jeff Wellstead. And our thinking about it is that the stuff that burns HR people out, tech can do so much better if it's the right tech. And we, selfishly, I think we're building tech for that purpose, not to replace HR people, but to liberate them from the things that tech is going to infinitely be better. Athena is a better interviewer than most mid-level HR people are. She has expertise across every single industry. She has 25 years of experience loaded into her. She's got frameworks that have been proven, right? The humans don't have that. But there are things that humans do right now that tech can't do. And if we can liberate those cycles, I think we fix some of the burnout that's happening in HR. Because, I mean, you said something that was important to me, because I keep talking to chief people officers of, varied size companies, and everybody seems burnt out. So I think you've got your finger on some of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really neat if you can, as you say, take the heavy work, the repetitive work of HR, and lean into an AI teammate to get that done, so that then the HR practitioners can be like, okay, I've got all of this, and it's more of a coaching, supporting,
right,
evangelizing job than doing.
One of the things our customers tell us right now is that they're, particular to their recruiters, because Athena does a lot of the intake work. In fact, she does all of the intake work that a recruiter would normally do. And she sets up for sourcing. And she does not source right now, but that's on our roadmap. We've got 6 or 7 additional teammates that we will build out as we continue our journey. But what our customers are telling us right now is that because those recruiters are not doing that work, they have bandwidth. And where they are rededicating that bandwidth is really twofold. One is with candidates. Because the fact is that we're not processing right now. The tech is not able to, do the kinds of nuanced analysis, that humans can do. And so spending time with candidates and really diving deep in their background, that's a place that our customers, recruiters, are putting their time. But the other one is with interviewers, teaching them and helping them to not just streamline the process, but make it more effective. And that's another place where, people need guides, and that's where the recruiter's time is going. So the second it got liberated, at least for our customers, it's getting filled right back up, but with more impactful consultative and strategic work rather than the administrative work.
Which I think is huge. I remember I was working with a large engineering firm in Houston, and this would have been 10, 12 years ago. And they'd won some huge projects. So they were hiring 20, 30 people a month in technical and engineering roles. And it was terrible. Like, you'd have these very technical leaders coming in and interviewing people in short bursts. And when you saw that happening, you would be like, right, so the candidate experience is awful because they're getting brought in for a 15 to 20 minute screening interview with an engineering manager. And we're not talking at all about the how we work, about, what fit is in this environment. We're really just validating some pretty obvious and simple things. So candidates were not having a good experience. Hiring managers were busy because they were in tons and tons of interviews. The HR team was basically a glorified scheduling assistant to put all the interviews together. And we were having, I would say, suboptimal outputs in terms of actually making offers and getting offers accepted.
Yeah.
And as soon as we turned that process around and we made it a more of a conversation about what is the work that we're doing here and how do we go about doing that work, and we did a bit more of the sourcing and screening up front so that only the better talent was getting through to the deeper conversation. Right. I think we went from probably a sub 40% conversion rate to like an 80% conversion rate. So it was phenomenal, and that turned around in about 6 weeks.
It's another reason that we built the product that we built as the starting point for our journey as a company is that the role design matters and creates either positive or negative consequences downstream for almost everything in talent management. When you think about it, like if I said to a sourcer, like, I'm going to only tell you half of what I'm really looking for.
Yeah.
Then the natural thing that happens, and it happens today, and you can watch it happen, is the sourcer goes out, does the best that he or she can do, comes back in with a bunch of candidates, and the manager goes, I think I need to see more. Well, why, what do you need? They need to have this. Well, why didn't you tell me that up front? Right?
Yeah.
Because you didn't know it, because you didn't think all the way through it. And that's, Athena helps those managers think all the way through it. So the instructions we give to the sourcers and to the people that are doing the screening interviews and to the talent team are really detailed specs.
Right.
And if you know what you're looking for, you don't have to see 300 candidates.
Correct.
Right? The second you find whatever your number is, but like if I found 5 that checked every box on my very detailed spec, why do I have to see everybody else?
Yeah.
Right. And so time to fill goes down drastically but quality stays high because there are ways to bring down time to fill, and you and I both know them, right?
Yeah.
But you sacrifice something to do it. Here, there are no sacrifices. There are no trade-offs. But it's
That's
all
neat.
because we did the hard work up front, and that made that greased the wheels for just everything else.
It's interesting because if you do that hard work up front, you bring time to fill down, you're getting better quality candidates in the door. My next question becomes, as I think about that team, okay, so we're growing, we know what our outputs are, what our objectives are. We're bringing the talent in where we need. What about the more dynamic thinking of, well, where do those team members go once they're in here, and where are the gaps that we need to hire for in the future? Are you starting to see, whether it's on your roadmap or from your past lived experiences, that once you do that front part of talent acquisition, right, you have more knowledge, capability, bandwidth to be looking at the succession planning, the development, the task and objective setting, across a team?
Well, I think there are point in time problems for what you just said, right?
Yeah.
I don't have any disregard or disrespect for social onboarding, which I think is important, or for the administrative components of onboarding, which are, important for a variety of reasons. But I don't hear an awful lot of organizations talking about onboarding to results. And in part, it's because they haven't been thoughtful about those results up front. One of the things that Athena helps you do, she'll help you get the job responsibilities focused on outcomes. Once you have those, she's going to look at the industry. She's going to look at the title of the position. She's going to look at the responsibilities for the position, the reporting relationship, the level of seniority. And she's going to say, okay, based on those factors, what are the best ways for us to measure the success around those specific outcomes? And she'll come back and say, look, here's a list of like 15 or 20 key performance indicators. And she'll help the user narrow that down. And we think the sweet spot is kind of 3 to 5.
Yeah.
If you're measuring less than 3 things, is it like, are you getting the complete version of success for the role? And if you're measuring more than 5, is it reasonable, one, that you can measure that many things? And 2, is it reasonable that the individual in the role can focus on those?
Yeah.
So then what she does is she translates those KPIs into what we call target results. So if, as a chief people officer, if my KPI is employee net promoter score, it's great that at least a CEO has said, Scott, that's your KPI. That's how I'm going to measure your success. But that's still too ambiguous until we say it's currently at 50 and it needs to be at 65 and it needs to happen over the next 18 months.
Yes.
That changes things, right? But then that also now creates something that I can onboard to.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that Athena creates is a performance charter, which is the beginning of a work plan. And at some point in the near future, we will have an AI teammate that actually coaches the new employee around creating the work plan to go out and achieve those results. So the starting point, and what can be done manually right now, is the idea of taking the target results out of the role design and then onboarding to those those results, and then starting to now trace over, let's pick a small time slice like a quarter, right? So over the next 13 weeks, we're going to look at where do you need to be and where are you, so that we don't hockey stick the curve at the end, right? We should have a nice smooth progression for most KPIs, right?
Yeah.
And we should be able to see, if we're going to miss it, we should be able to see it early.
Yeah, I like that. And I guess if you've got that work plan in place for the quarter, that team member can come in and share it with their colleagues. If there's an interdepartmental interface, they can be saying, hey, marketing, I need your help here to do this for employee value proposition or whatever. And I would also imagine that there's some way to kind of increase that, like, mattering and appreciation, across the different roles, to say, individually, these are my targets and performance outcomes, but collectively we're achieving this by putting these parts together as a team.
And you know what the tragic thing is? The work that Gallup organization does, they look at these factors that drive how people are feeling about work and the engagement levels that result from that. 45% of employees, this is from Gallup's 2024 work, so 6-7 months old, right? Actually, I think they released it in January of 25. 45% of people say they understand what is expected of them at work. Less than half. And that's tragic. And so when you talk about like what's driving engagement, if you want, like we spend so much money, and I can't remember what the stat is, on things that only matter when we're doing things wrong, like engagement surveys. If you get certain things right up front, you don't have to worry about surveying engagement because people are going to be engaged. And one of those things is, are they really crystal clear about how their role fits in and about what they are expected to do in that role?
Yeah.
And the target results and the outcomes are the ways that we communicate that to them.
Yeah. It is interesting. We've spoken to a few guests around people feeling overworked. We just talked about HR feeling overworked. But I find that often when you look at a team that's disengaged, people are just going through the motions, doing the tasks the way they've always done them and not really connecting to the outcomes, not doing the feedback loops, whether that's with a manager or cross-departmentally or with customers, to understand, hey, what about the way we're doing this work is not delivering the effect that we want to see.
So let me make an example so that hopefully it makes it crystal clear to everybody who's listening. Let's say that we were going to hire an accountant and we're bringing an accountant on board, right? Something that would typically be written into a legacy job description for that accountant is like follow up on delinquent accounts.
Yes.
So first of all, you got to ask yourself, why do we write stuff like that? Right? Is it because we need to see somebody sitting at a desk making phone calls to people that don't want to get them or writing emails to people that aren't going to read them?
Yeah.
Why is the effort our first focus? Now, there's a neuroscientific reason for that. It has to do with dopamine and the impact that we get from checking things off the list. But it's hurting us organizationally because following up on delinquent accounts is a means to an end. And in the accountant's sense, the end is days outstanding, which is a measure of how fast we're able to collect on monies that we're owed. Let's say we have a $10 million ARR company. If I can move days outstanding from 90 to 60, I create $833,000 worth of value for the business by collecting that money faster. And so why do we tell the accountant, your job is to follow up on delinquent accounts rather than telling them your job is to reduce days outstanding? Now I'm going to give you a target. It's currently 90. We want it to be at 60. Go work up a plan. Well, and this is what, in part, what Athena does is she gets managers thinking like this because now what you want, the ideal situation is for the manager to have the employee come and say, listen, Dane, if that's my job, shouldn't I do these things? And for you to go like, well, of course, like I hadn't even thought about that. I'm not on the front line of it. Do it. The tactics should be the subject of experimentation as long as everybody is jointly focused on the outcome that those tactics are supposed to produce. That gives agency to people. Now, they're owners. They take initiative because it's like your job is to solve this outcome-based problem. It's not to sit and do these things. And that's where I think, and I can't cite a study on it, but it seems reasonable given the other things that I know, that when people are feeling like they are overworked, it's because people keep giving them tasks and putting them in this box of activity-based stuff rather than making them an owner and giving them responsibility for something that really matters to the business.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense to me. And it goes back to your point earlier in the conversation around the differentiation between outcome and task.
And that's why we think that's so important. But most of us are not, wired to think in those terms. And training classes don't help. And that's why we built the training in. That's why Athena's role as a coach is so critically important because she's leading you through that process over and over and over again. And then you start to think in those terms as a result of walking that path.
So let's play that out a little further, that example. I really like that example. So let's say the accounting manager has a staff accountant who's responsible for driving days sales outstanding down from 90 to 60. And traditionally, we've always done it on the basis of, hey, have we put this many calls into those people? And now they explain that objective to the incoming staff member, and that staff member can go away and think about how they do this. Maybe they go and talk to the sales team and get the sales team engaged in setting up some conversations. They could do any number of things. How does Athena coach and capture those activities so that, going back to the research, the manager and the employees still feel comfortable that progress is being made and we're not just kind of waiting a quarter to see, hey, did the new thing work? Is there a workflow? Is there a way of negotiating the conditions of satisfaction of this new workflow? Like how does that play in for you?
Well, so I think you and I have had a couple of conversations about, the difference of a human in the loop system and particularly artificial intelligence that makes humans better at their job. And I think this is one of those places, right? Athena is not going to do all of it. Athena is going to help you get your head in the right place, and she's going to document all of this for you. But the next most important thing is, what are you doing in your one-on-ones? Right? Like when I see and when I've seen and when I've coached managers around it, like your one-on-one with your employees should be the meeting you absolutely positively do not miss.
Yeah.
But if you're not walking into it with a very specific formula for like what you want to accomplish, the formula being, how are you going to, get this out? Right. And when I say that, I mean, a part of the conversation should be, how are you doing to the results that we agreed we're going to get? Like, where do you need to be today and where are you today? And then, of course, there's a limited number of responses to that. I'm on target. I'm exceeding the target. I'm not to the target yet, right? Like that's kind of it.
Yeah.
So if you're not if you're not meeting the target yet, or if you're and it's not even the target because you haven't even gotten there, right? But if you're not on track to get to the target, then the conversation needs to change. So now it's like, okay, so what are you doing? And let's talk about that. And what else could you do? Because likely we're going to hear, well, people won't pick up the phone. Great. It doesn't change the outcome that you're responsible for. So if that tactic isn't working, you better try another tactic. Like what we want to do is build employee populations that are thinkers about the problem. And but to do that, we have to be able to experiment with them a little bit, right? Sitting at the desk and making the phone calls isn't producing. So what else are you going to try? I'm not going to solve that for you. I'm here to help you as the boss, but I'm not going to solve it for you. It's your problem to solve. That's why we hired you, is to move the number from here to here. And so if you think about it now, work that problem in reverse. For everybody who's worried about like, well, that person's not the right person. Well, why aren't they? Because maybe we hired them wrong. Maybe they were right for a different job. It's not that that person doesn't have any value, but if they can't jump in and be creative about solving the problem, did we place them right? It's our fault. We own it. It's right. Leadership is always accountable, or should always be accountable for the downstream consequences. We made the choice about who went in the role. We make the choice about how we're going to lead that role. We make the choice about where we're engaging them and where we're not, and what help we're providing. So, that forces you to now reconsider hiring mechanics. Are we hiring for the right thing? Which is why that role design is so critically important in its most detailed form. Because then we go, look, we understand the problems now. So now let's look for evidence in the person's past of where they've actually solved maybe similar problems. Now we bring in behavior-based interviewing, right? And so all of these, if you have a really solid role design, you can now coalesce a bunch of the different disparate things that we need to do to ensure that we get the right person in the right role, like behavior-based interviewing, like, top grading, like any of the other techniques.
Neat. So it does, going back to your earlier word of root cause, I think getting the outline for the role, the performance objectives, all set down, it lifts everything, your one-to-ones, your development planning, continuous improvement efforts, because you know who to go to for what, who's going to give you the feedback.
Right.
But it's interesting, you explain you need to create that little bit of room for experimentation, play, trying different things, which, in a busy world where people are so task motivated, that is I think a gap that a lot of leadership teams run into.
But it's it starts with a thinking gap. And for anybody in the audience who, I hope you have chief people officers who are listening in, or CEOs. I think one thing that we hear from early customer prospects is, well, my managers don't want to spend the time to do that. They don't have, it never gets phrased like that. It gets phrased as they don't have the time.
They don't have time.
Right? I'm a busy guy, but believe me, if Tiger Woods called up and was like, hey, would you like to play around? My calendar's clear.
Right? Yeah, you can make time.
Like
totally.
You can make time for it. And here's where I think it's important, because the average manager spends about a day a week compensating for underperforming employees. The actual number is 17%. 17% of their time. When you think about the cost of that for what some of the managerial salaries are, you're losing a full day compensating for your underperformers. Wouldn't it be better, especially since Athena can do everything that I've talked about in as little as 15 minutes?
Yeah.
right? Now that's not an average time, but it's a fast time. That's a coffee break, right?
Yeah.
You've got that time, and if you set yourself up for success and you could recapture as a manager a day a week, you're
Yeah.
golden.
It's funny. I had that conversation with a friend at the weekend. He's growing a business, and he said to me, Dane, what I don't understand is why would I pay a $50,000 fee to an agency to hire this person that I really need, when they can turn the person around in a week. And I said to him, the only reason recruitment agencies and executive search platforms have existed is because of how inefficient the whole sourcing selection process is. And the reality is the side that you're not seeing is that there are lots and lots of conversations happening that go nowhere, with multiple different companies. So there's inefficiency on both sides within your organization from a hiring perspective, within the staffing or search firm from the ability to put people together into jobs, because we're not getting clear on these job descriptions. We're not getting clear on interviewing processes, on onboarding. And it's definitely a thing, which if solved, it saves a huge amount of time and energy, which can be put towards the actual work.
You're spending the time one way or another. You're going to spend more of it downstream if you don't do the early stuff right. It just somehow doesn't make sense to me how everybody doesn't recognize that, but I think that's a part of our work, right? Is
because it's second order, isn't it? The first order is, I hate, like no one goes to bed on a Sunday night going, I can't wait to do those 3 interviews tomorrow morning, right? It just doesn't happen. But if you had a better guide and a coach and you knew you're interviewing the right candidates, it should be one of the most exciting moments. You're bringing great people into your team. You're learning, even from the people you don't hire, how they might approach problems that your team has. Like interviewing should be one of the highest energy producing activities for any hiring manager. But we're just not getting it right.
And what if you really know what you're looking for, you can join the candidate on the same side of the table. It's a joint look at like, hey, let's figure out whether we're right for each other. And when we talk about that concept of fit, right? Like all of the cards get held by employers. Yes. It's very hard for employees or prospective employees, candidates, to interview companies reliably, which is a problem that we really want to solve. We want to do work on candidate side and on employer side, because we fundamentally believe that when both sides are advantaged, that everybody wins. And that's what we're really after, right? Everybody doesn't fit everywhere, but everybody fits somewhere. And we've got all of these information asymmetry and other barriers that are in our way. And if we can pull those down, man, think about like what that does for people's desire to actually go to a job that they feel really, even on hard days, right? Like it's not like every day is going to get easy, but if you fit, like even hard days, they don't feel like it's the end of your career. It was a hard day,
Yeah. And actually that's a final point I wanted to wrap back to. Pre-show, you and I were talking about the excitement about AI teammates and human collaboration is pretty clear. But the frustration is that some people feel like, well, I can just use AI to push all the hard work towards, so I get to do the easy stuff. And I love what you just said there, which is if you use the AI teammate in the right way, you get clear on what your outcomes, what your objectives are as a team, and you start doing the work. And it's still going to be hard, and you're still going to grow through it, but it's going to be assisted, I think was the word that you said.
Yeah. The way I'm thinking about it right now, like we would all be horrified as parents if, the kid brings home homework and we took the homework away from the kid and did the homework and then gave it back and like, go on, go play, right? Nobody would feel good as a parent doing that, but we're looking for AI to do that for us. And I think right now, one of the biggest stumbling blocks ahead of us is that we've got this mindset that somehow AI is just going to do my things and I'm not going to have to think about it. Rather than saying, look, AI is like a really super good tool set that is going to help me do the work and lead the work differently. And that's one of the reasons that we believe that we're going to start to see a movement away from tech platforms, and into these concept of having digital teammates and human teammates working side by side, tackling different components of effectively the same problems.
Yeah, that is fascinating. And that's a really exciting outlook for the future of teamwork too, because if teams can come in and know who's playing what role, whether it's an AI or a human, and they're not having to jump between 23 different platforms to do different tasks, which are fairly inefficient, then it's going to create more conversation and more innovation and adaptability.
I'm going to be really excited as we build more AI teammates.
Yeah.
For the first customer who's willing to put boxes on their org chart and have AI teammates and human teammates, working together, because the org chart's it's another device for clarity, right? And if you understand, like, these roles are done by tech and these roles are done by humans, and here's how they sit together, and.
And we've already done this before. Like with the Industrial Revolution, we changed what were hand tasks to machine tasks. So there is already a roadmap for this if you look at process design, continuous improvement in manufacturing environments. We just need to adopt some of that thinking. Well, there's been some great points we've covered today, Scott. I particularly like that concept, which I think any listener can go out and do right now, which is, who are your best managers and where are the best teams in your organization? And just pause and think a little bit about how they think about outcomes versus tasks, how they're clear on strategy, how they're clear on measuring success, because you probably find that some of the best practices already exist. And if you want to do that at scale, I love the fact that you can bring in an AI teammate like Athena to actually start coaching that up and start creating some of those winning formulas that you're getting in your best teams with your best managers across all of your teams and all of your managers. So it's a really cool concept. I'm excited to jump in and play and try Athena out myself. How do our listeners best find you?
So if you want to find me personally, LinkedIn's usually the best way, and I love connecting with new people. And Dane, I'll tell you this, if people are struggling with this, we don't offer consulting services, and I'm not a consultant, but I care deeply about these problems. And if you're having a challenge and you want to talk about it, reach out and connect with me on LinkedIn, and we can find a time to Zoom. And I've been the recipient of so many people who have wanted to help, who believe in our mission, and who've just given of themselves, that I would feel horrible if I didn't return that, sort of back. So if you want to connect, it's linkedin.com/Ian/M.Scott.M. And the company name, if you want to check it, is PropulsionAI.
Awesome. We'll make sure to add all that in with the show notes. And I look forward to collaborating on these AI teammates on the org chart coming into the future.
I'm so excited to have been here. I loved talking with you about this, and I thank you so much for the invitation. It's been a pleasure.
Likewise. Thanks for the time, Scott.
Thank you for joining us. Remember that by embracing vulnerability, trusting our intuition, and approaching challenges with compassion, we not only strengthen our teams, but also pave the way for a future where collaboration thrives. If you're hungry for more insights, strategies, and research on collaboration, head over to thefutureofteamwork.com. There, you can join our mailing list to stay updated with the latest episodes and get access to exclusive content tailored to make your team thrive. Together, we can build the future of teamwork. Until next time.